Sometimes something will just kind of tumble out. Like Change the Locks was kind of like that. That was written pretty quickly. That song, Joy, I remember driving in my car in between whatever towns, and that song just came to me. You know, you can kind of feel the rhythm of the driving, you know. And I was really pissed off at this guy. So I had to get it out of my system. You take my joy, I'm on back. Yeah, my music is kind of a blend of a lot of different stuff. And I don't know what the final word would be for it. Everybody's been trying to figure that out for years and years, you know. I mean, they finally came up with Americana. I've been trying to enjoy all the fruits of my labor. I remember having a meeting with the record company guy in LA once, and he heard the songs and he said, well, I think you need to go back to the drawing board because none of your songs have bridges. Basically, that's when the middle finger comes out, you know, because I was a rebel. I like to think of myself that way. Although I did, and I still do love standard songs. I love the old standards that are written that way. You know, the kind of stuff that Sinatra sang and that sort of thing. I love that kind of stuff. But I just wasn't writing that way. I think there are advantages to being self-taught. You're not as inclined to follow the rules. And that's important when you're trying to create. I was pretty obsessed with the folk music scene back in the 60s, and I listened to a lot of different artists all the time. And went to record stores a lot and tried to learn some of those songs and play them, you know, at home, just sitting around with my guitar. I think mostly it was just exposure to a lot of different singer-songwriters back in the day. Bob Dylan probably being at the top of the list. Leonard Cohen, just a lot of great ones. Gordon Lightfoot. I remember when a friend of mine introduced me to the music of Robert Johnson. I don't know how to describe it. It just, you know, just got me down to my bones. It's so hard to describe the blues and what it is and what it does. It's just such an ethereal thing almost. There's something just very primal about it that I like, and just ancient, you know, and beautiful and sexy and romantic. It's everything. I got rambling on my mind. They're all self-taught, and there's nothing formulaic at all about it. That to even suggest that would be a grave insult, you know. I would almost could separate out, like, I have no interest in even knowing someone who doesn't like this stuff. Then, of course, there was my dad, who is a poet. My dad would have these creative writing workshops, and I would just sit in on those and listen. I discovered Flannery O'Connor's writing and just read everything I could find on her, and then went from her to Eudora Welty and Carson McCullers and all of them, you know, until I got to William Faulkner. Because I decided, well, you know, I've got to read Faulkner. I'm reading all these other Southern writers, and he was the master of it all. But I didn't really like it. I forget which book I was reading of his, but so I talked to my dad, who was always there as kind of my mentor of sorts, you know, and I said, Dad, I'm trying to read Faulkner, and I'm just not digging it, you know. And he says something like, that's okay, honey. Faulkner was an asshole anyway. You know, because he'd met him at a cocktail party or something one time. I think the thing about Flannery O'Connor's writing was the pure honesty of it and the grit. She wrote about misfits and people who weren't perfect. And they all had some sort of broken part, but she had this empathy at the same time. That's why I fell in love with her writing, I think. And it made me want to write more about people and try to get inside their heads a little bit, but be able to write about someone who was broken without judgment. I would say my song Drunken Angel deals with that. How'd you ever let it go that far, Drunken Angel? Also Lake Charles and Poniola, about the poet in Arkansas who took his own life. Frank Stanford was the poet. He is the subject of my song Poniola. Look at us standing around the grave and not a soul they knew. Drunken Angel and Lake Charles, I labored over and Car Wasn't a Gravel Road took a lot of work. It's a lot more challenging writing about someone who, like we were talking about, someone who has been broken and suffering, because you don't want to be pointing the finger at them or anything, you want to present them with empathy. Well, it used to be when I would sit down to write, I would just kind of do a little bit of melody in my head and a little bit of lyrics. And then it would just kind of build from there. Now I find myself more often writing lyrics first and just coming up with a kind of a cadence in my head while I'm writing the lyrics, so they kind of have some rhyme scheme to them and kind of a little bit of a lilt. And then I sit down and put music to the lyrics. I feel my dad looking over my shoulder at my writing, because I used to show him all my songs when they were finished to get his approval. When I was first becoming a songwriter, he would say, try to stay away from these trite cliche phrases like the moon in June and the stars in your eyes and, those kinds of things that you see in a lot of songs. Oh, yeah, that's the other thing I learned, slant rhyming, which is very liberating to have discovered, because then you don't have to worry about, there's no sense in trying to rhyme words completely exactly. That's just kind of corny. I remember Side of the Road. When I initially wrote that, it was, kind of I was finger picking acoustic guitar, and it was kind of a folk type, ballad type thing. And then I took it into the band I was working with at the time in the studio, and suddenly it just kind of became something else with bass and drums. Once you add a rhythm section to a song, it changes the dynamics of it. I want to see what it feels like to be without you. Some of my songs have definitely evolved, I guess is the word, into kind of an edgier, more rocking sort of a vibe. The musicians I end up working with like to rock out quite a bit, so that's just a given. Writing songs that somebody else covers it's always such an honor. And I guess there are different kinds of songwriting. Like Nashville has, there are a ton of people in Nashville who that's all they do is write songs for other people. I'm not sure I'm equipped to do that, but I've just been lucky because different artists have reached out and discovered a song that I've written and decided to record it. Yeah, Betty LaVette covered Joy. I got a real kick out of that. She did a great version of it, I thought. I said I started in Detroit looking for my joy. Some of the other musicians I've worked with who've really inspired me have been, Steve Earle. I didn't really sit down and write with her, but Chrissie Hynde, she asked me to come in and sing on this Rolling Stones song, Sway. I love that album, the Lauryn Hill album. Well, for one thing, her name kept grabbing my attention because every time a best of year-end list would come out, both of us would be on it. So I felt like we were kind of just moving along side by side, but in different categories maybe. But then the Grammys came up and we were both nominated for different things. And so I decided that year I was going to write down a list of the artists who had been nominated for things and go buy their records. And hers was one, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Yeah. And I really liked it. I really dug it, And that kind of inspired my song Righteously.
Think this really down for you every time. You spend me a good view, it's mine.
Which got a negative review. It might have been in the New York Times. I don't know. But the guy said, he mentioned my song Righteously, and he said, Lil' Kim, she ain't.
Flirt with me, don't keep hurting me, don't cause me pain. Be my lover, don't play no game.
In Nashville, I was downtown at Tootsie's bar one time. They used to have these little jam sessions that would happen there. I was in there one night playing, and then I got off stage, and this guy came up to me and said, he was probably about 20 or something, and sat down next to me and said, I want to know how to write songs like you do. Tell me how you do it. Tell me what do I do? How do I do it? And I thought, well, what can I tell him in a shortened form, that's going to make going to make a difference maybe. And I said, okay, well, the first thing you have to do is be willing and able to look way down deep inside yourself into those dark corners that you maybe don't feel comfortable looking at. And I said, you got to be able to do that, though. And he stopped for a minute, and he looked at me, and he said, I don't think I can do that. And it just broke my heart.
I find myself alone.
Where the Song Can Find Me, it's actually about the beauty and power of songs and songwriting. And it kind of just says in the song, it could be anywhere, anytime when the muse hits. And it just goes through different depictions of where you might be on a bar stool, sitting on a stool, or on the streets of New York in a busy crowd. And then it says, I want to be where the song can find me. Has to find you wherever you are. It will find you wherever you are.
Where the song can find